a lot of smoke. Do you get the sense there's any fire here? Like, is this an actual fit that you could see happening?
By the way, to just put a bow on the Desharnais conversation,
Okay.
the Oilers did receive a bunch of calls from other teams about him last summer that they were trying to just see if he actually mattered in Edmonton's system. And the Oilers rebuffed those. So obviously that's worked out well.
Hmm.
Um, with regards to Jakob Chychrun, I think he's someone obviously that they've discussed internally, and I would say my read on the situation, while there's been increased smoke there, is that the asset cost is so significant for this team that I don't know that anyone's looking at him right now as someone that will put this team over the top. They've played really well. They have a good team. If he was a number one defenseman or probably a number two, I think you go out and you're willing to pay the price. But I think there's so many teams out there that are in a position where they say we like the contract, we like the player, but we think he's somewhere between a number two and a number three, and that's such a steep price to pay. A lot of it based on the surplus value that was in that contract that is also really going to dissipate a lot once the cap goes up. So, is there a level of intrigue? I would say probably fair, but is it something that I see materializing over the next 23 days? I'm hard pressed to believe that, and frankly, I'm hard pressed to believe at this point right now that the Oilers are going to be super active and pull off something big, just the way I see it at the moment.
How comfortable would the Coyotes be holding on to Chychrun into the summer? Liam and I were talking about it yesterday where, Liam made the point of, hey, they haven't gotten what they want yet, and he's been on the block for like a full calendar year. But because he has term, I kind of sit there and go, why wouldn't they at least wait until the offseason to see if a team gets desperate at the draft or something? Do you get the sense that they're just really not going to budge off this asking price between now and the deadline?
I think that would be a really tough way to manage your assets because then after the player's already made the request, after he's come in and delivered with the play, and his point production has been there, his mobility has been there. He really worked to come back from the injuries that he had, two significant ones. Um, I think that really begins to damage your organization in the sense that you've been talking about moving the player. The player wants to be moved and he's played well. That means that if he's not traded, it's because your ask and what you're looking for in the return is unreasonable. So I don't think that it's going to linger into the summer, and I think if it does, you have to find a way to move on in the summer. He can't come back and play for your team next season. To me, it's kind of one of those spots where they have to rip the band-aid off at some point or another. And my guess is that at some point over these next 23 days, something will materialize, and it either involves one team blinking to stay to pay up and pay the price, or the Coyotes blinking and changing their ask just a little bit and being a little bit more flexible, I should say.
Frank Seravalli joining the show for our friends at Star Mechanical. There's another player who's popped up recently that I am just wildly intrigued by because even though he's hurt and out for the season, he's staying on your trade board, and that's Gustav Nyquist. What's the word on Nyquist? Is this a guy who, like, is the injury just enough to keep him out for the regular season and he could jump in round one of the playoffs? Do you have any insight there?
Free asset. That's what Gustav Nyquist is. And not saying the Blue Jackets are going to trade him for nothing, but the expectation is from a cap perspective, he will end up being totally free because he's not expected to come back for the regular season, but is in a window where he could potentially be healthy for the first round of the playoffs. And therefore, in an odd way, I think his value has actually increased on the market and probably increase the likelihood of a trade because a team doesn't have to worry about fitting him in under the cap. He can go immediately to LTIR once he arrives there and then be activated in the playoffs for no salary cap cost. So I think he's a pretty decent facilitator. His numbers have actually been pretty decent this year, and we did a deep dive earlier as part of our deadline countdown series on Gustav Nyquist. And I think you put him in the right situation on a third line and give him space. He's someone that could really add to your team and also a pretty decent playoff performer as well. A few deadlines ago, he went to the San Jose Sharks. put up a half point per game in the playoff run and was a big reason why they reached the Western Conference Final.